Let me ask you something. What would you do if everything you loved, your home, your land, your memories, was swallowed in minutes by something you couldn't control? What if the sky turned black, the rivers roared like thunder, and all you could do was run? Now imagine standing there, ankle deep in mud, heart heavy with loss, looking up at the sky and wondering, why? Was it just nature? Or was it a message? This is not just a story about water. This is not just a flood. This is a revelation. One that shakes not only the ground beneath our feet but the illusions in our hearts. Because when 5 lakh cusecs of flood water tears through Pakistan, it's not just a crisis. It's a warning, a scream from the earth, a verse come alive. And yes, what scientists are now discovering in the Quran will shake you, not just your mind, but your soul. In this journey, we're going to connect what many thought could never be connected: disaster and destiny, science and scripture, warnings and wisdom. So sit back, listen closely, not just with your ears but with your heart, because by the end of this, you won't just know what happened, you'll understand why it happened. And once you know that truth, you'll never look at the rain the same way again. Stay with me, this might just change everything. When the river rises, it doesn't ask your name. It doesn't care about your status, your possessions, your titles, or your connections. Water comes like a messenger of truth, washing away illusion, arrogance, negligence, and apathy. And in Pakistan, when 5 lakh cusecs of water surged forward like a beast unchained, it was not just a natural disaster. It was a divine interruption. It was a loud, undeniable scream from the earth itself. A cry that echoed through villages, through the cracks of collapsing homes, through the shattered windows of schools and mosques, and into the hearts of the living. This was not just a flood. This was a wake-up call. That kind of flood doesn't whisper, it roars. It doesn't nudge, it breaks. It doesn't give you a second chance to pack your belongings. It gives you seconds to run for your life. That's what thousands of people faced when floodwaters rose beyond control, spilling across fields, highways, homes, and dreams. 5 lakh cusecs, that's not just a number, that's a force of nature. That's millions upon millions of gallons surging together with a purpose. To remind mankind that we are not in control, to remind a sleeping people that the earth remembers and it reacts. In a world where we've grown numb to headlines, desensitized to numbers, where people scroll past tragedy like it's entertainment, this flood was not content to be another statistic. It demanded attention. It pulled at the very soul of the country. Families clung to rooftops, mothers held crying infants, unsure whether they'd see another sunrise. Crops, the very lifeline for rural families, vanished beneath muddy, raging waves. Men who worked all their lives to build homes watched their life's work crumble in minutes. Generations of stability and struggle wiped clean like chalk from a blackboard. This was more than an event. This was a mirror held up to us all. And in that mirror, what did we see? We saw roads washed away that should have been elevated. We saw towns destroyed that should have had proper drainage. We saw early warnings that were never sent. We saw the cost of years of negligence, corruption, short-sighted policies, and the absolute refusal to listen to science, to experts, and most painfully to the voice of reason. And beyond that, we saw a nation that forgot its own scripture, that turned away from the wisdom written centuries ago in a book so divine, so powerful, that its verses not only spoke of mercy and guidance, but of water, of floods, of nations destroyed when they ignored the science. The book, the Quran, is not a dusty relic of ancient rituals. It is a living guide, and in its pages are warnings more relevant than ever. It tells us stories of people who thought they were safe, who built high walls, tall buildings, strong armies, who believed that their power could protect them from the will of the Creator. But when the floods came, no wall stood strong enough, no fortress secure enough, no voice loud enough to silence the flood. Nations like the people of Nuh, who laughed at the ark, who ridiculed the idea of water as punishment. And then the rain came. The earth gushed from below and the sky poured from above. Everything they thought was secure, everything they believed invincible, gone. That's not just a religious lesson, that's a timeless warning. That's history repeating itself. That's scripture verified in real time. And if we look at what happened in Pakistan during the flood, we see not just a crisis of weather, but a crisis of spirit. A country that for years has witnessed floods, has watched glaciers melt, has endured droughts and heat waves, yet still chooses to look the other way, still builds homes on riverbanks, still chops down trees, still throws plastic into canals, still ignores every sign of imbalance until nature comes to balance itself. That flood, that surge of 5 lakh cusecs, it didn't just break embankments, it broke illusions. It told us that no matter how many apps we use, how many vehicles we drive, how many screens we hide behind, we are still at the mercy of forces far greater than us. And when those forces respond to our abuse, when the earth groans from our greed, it doesn't do so gently. It comes with might. And the Quran reminds us over and over that when the balance of the earth is tempered with, there will be consequences. That water, which gives life, can also take it. That the skies and the earth are in constant remembrance of their Lord, and they obey His command when He says be, and it is. We saw rivers that had served communities for centuries suddenly turn hostile. We saw canals become pathways of destruction. But the truth is, it was not the rivers that changed, it was us. It was our behavior, our decisions, our disregard for nature, our disregard for divine warnings. We shifted the natural course, we deforested hillsides, we ignored floodplains, we built dams without consensus, and we stored wealth instead of water management systems. Then we cried, "Where is God?" But God has spoken, and His words have echoed for 1400 years, waiting for us to listen. Floods are not just about water, they are about neglect. They are about broken promises, broken systems, and broken faith. They are about the farmer who warned the officials but was ignored, the scientist who published the paper but no one read, the student who studied climate models but whose voice never made it to the policy table. They are about the old man in the village who pointed to the sky and said, "This is not normal," and everyone laughed until the water came. But even in destruction, there is a message. Even in the roaring flood waters, there is mercy, because sometimes it takes destruction to awaken a generation. Sometimes it takes loss to inspire change. Sometimes it takes standing knee deep in muddy water, holding a crying child to understand that we have responsibilities beyond our own comfort, that we were never sent here to conquer the earth but to be its caretakers. And that is a truth echoed both by science and scripture. Science tells us that these floods are a result of increased glacial melt, of changing rainfall patterns, of a warming planet. It tells us about carbon footprints, emission levels, and rising sea levels. And the Quran told us over a millennium ago to walk the earth lightly. Not to spread corruption, not to act arrogantly. It warned us of nations who rejected guidance and paid the price. It warned us that the earth will bear witness, and today it has The 5 lakh cusecs flood was not the end, it was the beginning of a new awareness, a new responsibility. It was a line drawn in the mud saying, "This far, no further." We cannot live as though the earth owes us comfort without consequence. We cannot pray for rain and then pollute the rivers. We cannot beg for blessings and then ignore the burdens we were meant to carry. And the flood reminded us that when we fail in that duty, the earth responds. This wasn't just about Pakistan. This was about all of us, about every person who thinks their actions don't matter, about every government that prioritizes short-term gain over long-term survival, about every leader who forgets that power without responsibility is a path to ruin, about every child who deserves to grow up in a world where rivers are blessings, not threats, about every verse in the Quran that waits patiently, silently, until moments like these force us to pay attention. This flood stripped us of our masks. It exposed our fragility, and in that exposure lies the chance to rebuild not just homes but hearts, to reconnect not just with infrastructure but with faith, to understand not just the science of water but the message it carries. Because sometimes most powerful sermons are not given in mosques, they are given in muddy streets, in broken towns, in the silence after the water recedes. And if we have ears to hear, the message is clear. Return to balance, return to purpose, return to the path where nature and faith walk hand in hand. Because the next flood may not give a second warning. The flood was not just a disaster, it was a divine reminder, a mirror held up to our souls, our systems, and our sense of responsibility. 5 lakh cusecs of water didn't just sweep through land, it swept through our false sense of security. It forced us to realize that no matter how advanced we become, no matter how high we build our walls or how loud we shout our achievements, we are still guests on this earth, and the host is watching. The Quran spoke of these moments not as coincidences, but as consequences, not as mere weather events, but as warnings carved into creation. It showed us that nature and divine truth are not two separate things. They are one and the same, and when we ignore either, we suffer both. This is not the end, this is a beginning, a call to live differently, a call to honor the earth as a trust, to use knowledge with humility, to turn back to the words of the one who created both river and the rain, both the sun and the soul, because in that turning there is hope. In that surrender there is strength, and in that reflection there is renewal. May you carry this message forward, not just in thought, but in action. May you be among those who listen before it's too late, who rebuild with purpose, who rise with faith. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for giving your time, your heart, and your attention to something that matters.